My name is Julia Hammond. I'm 38 years old, and if you had met me a few years ago, you'd have thought I was one of those women who'd won at life. Successful business, beautiful house, charming husband who knew which fork to use at charity dinners. The kind of couple people point to and say, goals. They didn't see the quiet way we stopped trying to understand each other. They definitely didn't see the scorecard. I met Ethan 12 years ago at a charity auction. I was there as the sound woman, the one making sure the mics didn't screech and the jazz trio didn't drown out the speeches. My company was only 2 years old back then. Custom sound systems for high-end homes and boutique businesses. Not glamorous, but I loved it. Music, engineering, problem solving. It was mine. Ethan wasn't even supposed to be there for the cause. He was a +1 for one of my clients, a property developer with more money than taste. The developer abandoned him at our table to go charm donors, and there Ethan sat, perfect suit, lazy smile, nursing a drink he obviously didn't like. "I don't understand half the art they're auctioning," he muttered, more to himself than to me, "but I'm pretty sure that chair is a crime." I looked up from my tablet where I was checking the program. "That's not a chair," I said. "It's a meditation structure." He studied it again. "Looks like someone lost a fight with IKEA." I laughed, out loud. In the middle of a room where everyone else was trying to out-whisper each other about valuations and foundations. He glanced at my badge. "Julia Hammond," he read. "Audio engineer. So you're the reason I can hear the MC and not just the forks." "Trying to be," I said. "You?" "Ethan Miller, professional decor prop. I'm here to make my friend look married, or at least emotionally stable." We spent the rest of the evening making quiet, irreverent commentary about the room, who pretended not to see who smiled with teeth and who smiled with eyes. At one point, he leaned over and said, "If you ever need a fake +1, I come with terrible jokes and the ability to remember everyone's drink order." Within 6 months, he wasn't my fake anything. We'd signed a lease together on a small apartment with squeaky floors and one good window. By the time 2 years had passed, we were planning a wedding and arguing about napkin colors like it mattered. The only thing I truly dug my heels in on was the prenup. It wasn't romantic, I know that. "Nothing says I love you like a contract," Ethan joked when I first brought it up. But my company had survived solely because I'd lived on ramen and missed birthdays to make it work. A mentor told me early on, "Protect your business like you'd protect a child. Love can end. Contracts don't care." So I insisted. Ethan had a law degree, though he'd never practiced. He was working in marketing for Beacon Hill Luxury Properties, already charming Boston's old money into listing their brownstones with his firm. Still, I insisted he get his own attorney to review the document. I didn't want future resentment to grow in the cracks of, I didn't know what I was signing. He took the draft, made a few suggestions, and one evening at our kitchen table, he signed. "This isn't you betting against us," he said, rolling the pen between his fingers. "It's you betting on you. I respect that." I pressed my forehead against his shoulder, relief flooding me. I had no idea that years later, we'd both be sitting in a courtroom while that same piece of paper became the only reason my company was safe from his entitlement. The first 5 years of marriage were real. Not perfect, but real. There were the small things, mismatched socks, arguments about whose turn it was to cook, nights when we were too tired to do anything but eat cereal in bed and watch bad TV. There were the big things. My first high-profile installation for a celebrity client, his first major luxury condo launch, the day we got the keys to our house in a quiet Boston suburb. The house had creaky stairs and a yard just big enough for an outdoor speaker setup, which I, of course, designed within 2 weeks. Financially, we were comfortable. Not private jet comfortable, but nice car in the driveway and vacations that involve real hotels, not motels, comfortable. We had a joint savings account. I put in about 70%. My business had taken off faster, and high-end sound systems aren't cheap. Ethan contributed the rest from his salary, and we both had full access. It felt fair. We were a team. If you asked me back then, I would have told you I trusted him completely. I also would have admitted, if pressed, that I worked too much. I'd get lost in a project and forget dinner plans. I'd be halfway through tuning a home theater when my phone would buzz with his text, "Are you still alive?" I'd apologize, promise to make it up to him, and usually he'd brush it off with a joke. "Just bring home dessert next time," he'd say. I can forgive almost anything for tiramisu. I thought that was enough, that "I'm sorry" plus cheesecake could plaster over the cracks. Apparently, he was keeping a different kind of score. 3 years ago, everything shifted. Beacon Hill promoted Ethan to director. It came with a shiny title, a salary bump, and a key card to a whole other ecosystem: yacht parties, art openings, private museum nights where people casually talked about buying summer homes the way other people talk about buying new shoes. At first, I tried to be his plus one. I squeezed myself into rented gowns I didn't really like, balanced on heels I definitely didn't like, and smiled through conversations about which boarding school had the better lacrosse team. I can talk for hours about acoustic treatment in challenging rooms. I know exactly how to make a glass-walled condo sound warm instead of like an echo chamber, but I cannot, for the life of me, pretend to care about whose chef is overrated this season. After a while, I started turning down invitations. I've got an early installation, I'd say, or I really need to finalize this design. Both true, technically. Ethan seemed relieved. It's actually easier to network if I'm not worrying whether you're bored, he told me once, adjusting his cufflinks in the hallway mirror. You hate these things. He wasn't wrong. I did hate them. I told myself we were just dividing and conquering. He charmed the money. I built the product. Different arenas, same team. He began going alone more and more. Yacht parties, late client dinners, just drinks that stretched past midnight. I'd be half asleep when I heard the door click and his footsteps pad down the hall. Sometimes he'd slip into bed smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't mine. Client hugged me goodbye, he'd murmur when I wrinkled my nose. You know how they are. I laughed it off. I trusted him. I wanted to trust him. The year he forgot our anniversary, I told myself it was just the job. When he sulked for days after Christmas at my parents' old farmhouse in Vermont because of the spotty cell service, I told myself city people just don't understand rural winters. My mom's questions about grandkids had clearly hit a nerve. I chalked it up to pressure. We had tense moments, sure, raised voices, tears, apologies. But in my head, these were normal marital rough patches. Things we'd look back on someday and say, wow, remember when we almost let work get between us? I didn't know that somewhere along the line, he'd decided each of those rough patches was worth one free pass to sleep with someone else. I didn't know that in 8 months, I'd come home one night, step into our hallway, and hear my husband in the next room laughing as he told a friend that his current count was 7. 7 women. 7 betrayals. 7 punishments for sins I didn't know I was supposedly committing. But that night hadn't happened yet. Not in this part of the story. Right now, in this version of the past, I'm still the woman who believes hard work can heal anything, who thinks trust is a given as long as you're not actively lying. The woman who still thinks her marriage is flawed, but fundamentally safe. The woman who doesn't yet know that her husband is carefully, quietly keeping score. 8 months before that coffee table confession, I came home a day early. I was supposed to be in New York for a 3-day installation. Massive penthouse, floor-to-ceiling glass, the kind of job that pays more in one weekend than my first year of business had made in total. My crew and I finished ahead of schedule. The client signed off, happy, and I caught an earlier train back to Boston. The whole ride home, I pictured Ethan's face when he saw me. I imagined dropping my suitcase by the door, creeping into our bedroom, and sliding under the covers beside him. Maybe he'd mumble something and pull me closer in his sleep. Maybe we'd sleep in on a weekday for once, just because we could. When I slipped my key into the front door lock, the house was lit up. It was almost midnight. Not exactly lights off, Netflix paused, husband snoring, energy. I pushed the door open quietly, out of habit more than suspicion. I didn't want to wake him if he'd fallen asleep on the couch. The air smelled faintly of red wine and something citrusy. His diffuser, probably, or maybe a candle. Then I heard it. His laugh. Low, unguarded, the version of his laugh he used when he didn't know anyone was listening. So what's your count now? Another voice asked. Male, not quite familiar, not quite stranger. Someone from his world. I froze in the entryway, my suitcase handle digging into my palm. There was a clink of glass, the sound of someone shifting on the leather couch we'd picked out together. Ethan's voice came through, amused and tired, and weirdly proud. Counting tonight? 7, he said. But who's keeping track? My heart didn't stop. If anything, it sped up. My brain, though, went very, very still. 7. I told myself I'd misheard. 7 what? Deals? Listings? Drinks? Obviously you are, the other man said. You remember them all. What was disappointment number 7 again? Oh, that one's easy, Ethan replied. She forgot our anniversary, left me sitting at Sorolina like an idiot for an hour. The maitre d' felt so sorry he sent dessert on the house. My vision blurred. The room spun, but the memory was crystal clear. 2 months earlier, I'd been buried in a nightmare install that had gone sideways. We were under a brutal deadline, and I was knee-deep in cables and code when my phone buzzed with Ethan's text. Babe, everything okay? You're late. I'd stared at the time, felt my stomach drop, and realized, with sick, cold horror, that I'd mixed up our dates in my calendar. I arrived at the restaurant almost an hour late, breathless and apologizing. He'd been furious, rightfully so. I'd spent the next week making it up to him, reservations, handwritten notes, a weekend getaway. He'd told me he forgave me. Apparently, he'd marked it as disappointment number 7 instead. And number 6? The friend asked. There was the sound of someone pouring more wine. Christmas at her parents' cabin, Ethan said, dramatically sighing. 5 days in rural Vermont, spotty cell service, her mom asking when I'm giving her grandchildren like it's my job alone. I thought I was going to chew my own arm off. The cabin, the snow, my mom's lopsided gingerbread cookies, Ethan staring at the ceiling at night like he was trapped. We'd argued in the car on the way back. Sure, but later we talked about kids in soft, hypothetical terms. I'd gone to bed that night thinking we'd taken a step toward building something bigger. Apparently, he'd walked into our bedroom, opened his invisible ledger, and filed it under reason to cheat number 6. I stood there in the dark hallway, listening to my life be tallied up like a loyalty program. I don't know how long I stayed. Long enough to realize I wasn't mistaken. Long enough to understand they weren't talking about some jokey metaphorical count. You're insane, man, the friend said. You actually matched each, to a specific thing she did? Major disappointment gets one reset, Ethan replied. It balances the scales. I don't resent her. Marriage stays intact. Win-win. My breath came in shallow bursts. My first instinct was to storm into the living room and tear everything apart. To scream. To demand explanations. To throw the wine glasses into the fireplace just to hear something shatter that wasn't me. Instead, I did something I still don't quite recognize as myself. I backed away. Very slowly, very quietly, I picked up my suitcase, opened the front door, and stepped back into the cold night. I heard his laugh again as the door clicked shut behind me. The hotel I ended up in was 2 miles away and 3 worlds removed from our house. I sat on the edge of a stiff bed with my coat still on, staring at the ugly floral bedspread like it could offer answers. My phone lit up twice, once with a spam notification, once with a late email from a client. Nothing from Ethan. I could have called him, texted, I'm home, I heard you. Instead, I did what I always do when a system fails. I took inventory. Had I neglected him? Yes, sometimes. Had I missed dinners? Absolutely. Had I let my work swallow me whole? More than once. Did any of that make what he was doing okay? My brain twisted itself into knots trying to make it make sense. If I were better, more attentive, more affectionate, more available, would there be no 7? Would he be home right now, alone and loyal, instead of toasting his latest justification with a friend? Around 3 in the morning, I realized something that made me feel physically sick. If I woke up tomorrow and promised him I'd be perfect from now on, no missed dates, no late nights, no forgotten anniversaries, I would still be married to a man who slept with 7 other women and convinced himself that he was entitled to do it. Even if I fixed everything about me that he didn't like, I would still be with someone who believed love was a ledger and cheating was a refund. I didn't sleep that night, but something inside me shut off. Not my heart, not yet. That would take months. Just the part that assumed we were on the same team. I went home at 8 in the morning. The house looked exactly the same as it had the night before, like nothing had shifted at all. There were 2 empty wine glasses in the sink, a bottle of Cabernet half-finished on the counter, and Ethan at the kitchen island in a t-shirt and joggers, scrolling on his phone with the bored focus of someone checking sports scores. He looked up, surprised. Jules, you're back early. He leaned in, offering his cheek automatically. I set my bag down and poured myself coffee instead. How was the installation? He asked. Fine, I said. We finished ahead of schedule. Nice, he replied, tapping his phone. You should invoice them before Friday so it hits this quarter. I watched him for a moment. The easy posture, the casual tone, the way his hair stuck up at the back like he'd slept well. Busy night? I asked. He didn't blink. Quiet. I just caught up on work and went to bed early. The lie was so smooth it almost impressed me. It also hurt more than I expected. Not just because it was a lie, but because it was practice. This wasn't a man tripping over his first deception. This was someone who knew exactly how to say what I wanted to hear. "I came home last night," I said. His thumb stilled over the screen. "What?" "I came home last night," I repeated, around midnight. He stared at me, eyes narrowing slightly. "I heard you in the living room," I continued. "With someone, a man. You were talking about your count. 7, I think?" The color drained from his face, just for a second. Just long enough for me to know I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't wrong. Then the blood rushed back, flushing his cheeks as his expression hardened. "You were spying on me?" he snapped. I almost laughed. "I walked into my own house, Ethan. You eavesdropped." "I listened to my husband talk about how many times he's cheated on me, like he's tracking loyalty points," I shot back. "That's not eavesdropping. That's overhearing a confession." He pushed his chair back and stood, palms flat on the counter. "It's not what you think." My heart did that awful thing, where it leans forward, desperate, hopeful. Please say it's not what I think. Tell me 7 is a joke. Tell me I misheard. "What is it then?" I asked. "Because it sounded like you've been sleeping with other women and matching each one to a major disappointment you think I caused you." He stared at me for a long moment, jaw clenched. Then he laughed. Not a happy laugh, not even a bitter one. Just hollow. "Fine," he said. "You want the truth?" "Yes. I've been seeing other people. 7 of them. Once for every time you've really let me down in this marriage." I felt my knees go weak and grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. "You're joking," I whispered. "I'm not," he said. "You think you're the only one who sacrifices? I've been second to your work, your clients, your projects for years. Do you have any idea what it was like sitting alone at that restaurant on our anniversary, or stuck in that cabin, cut off from the world, while your mom grilled me about grandkids like I'm some defective appliance?" "So instead of talking to me," I said slowly, "instead of saying hey, I'm hurting, or can we go to therapy, you created a system where you get one free cheat for each time you decide I've failed you?" He shrugged, as if we were discussing something logistical, like splitting the gas bill. "I decided I was entitled to some compensation for emotional neglect," he said. "One encounter per major disappointment. It balances things out. I don't resent you. We keep the marriage intact." "Compensation," I repeated, "like a coupon." "Don't be dramatic, Julia. You have a secret punch card of infidelity that you update every time you think I've screwed up," I said. "That's not dramatic. That's psychotic." "It's not like I'm having an affair," he said. "These are just incidents. Separate. They don't mean anything. I'm not emotionally invested. It's just physical." I stared at him, searching for some flicker of shame, some sign that he understood what he was saying. There was nothing. "Does that make it better?" I asked quietly. "That you've been methodically sleeping with different women as punishment instead of falling in love with just one?" His gaze didn't waver. "It's kept me from resenting you. It's kept us functioning." Us. I looked around the kitchen. The coffee maker we'd picked together. The ugly ceramic fruit bowl his sister had given us. The corkboard calendar with our appointments, dinners, and birthdays neatly written in different colors. "Our marriage ended," I said slowly. "The first time you decided alone that you were allowed to cheat on me. You just didn't bother to tell me you'd called it." He straightened, jaw tightening. "Well, now you know. So what are you going to do about it?" I thought of the woman I had been even 12 hours earlier, the one who still believed hard work could fix anything. I thought of the girl at the charity auction, laughing with him over ugly chairs and overpriced sculptures. I thought of the scorecard I'd never signed up for. "I'm going to keep count," I said. And then I picked up my coffee, walked past him, and left the room. I didn't collapse. I didn't scream. I didn't even pack a bag. I sat in my car in the driveway with the engine off, staring at the faint frost crawling across the windshield, and felt something inside me click into place. A part of me that had been begging for scraps of reassurance for years finally went silent. Not healed, not numb, just done. By the time the sun rose, done had transformed into something colder, focused, strategic. Because if Ethan believed marriage was a ledger, then I was done playing cashier. The day after, I called into work and told my assistant I needed a few personal days. "Everything okay?" she asked. I looked at my reflection in the microwave glass. Last night's mascara smudged, hair tangled, the ghost of a woman who hadn't slept, and said, "It will be." "It's sis." I showered, dressed, braided my hair back like I always did on big installation days, and opened my laptop. Then I Googled the name I already knew I would find. Caroline Rothman. Boston's top divorce attorney. The kind of attorney whose name makes people lower their voices. The kind of attorney wealthy men hired when they wanted to ruin their ex-wives. Or, occasionally, the kind I hired to ruin their plans. I'd learned about her years ago from a mentor who'd said, half-jokingly, "Julia, know the best divorce attorney in town before you ever need her. It's the same logic as buying fire insurance before the building burns." I'd laughed at the time. I wasn't laughing now. Her assistant picked up on the second ring. Caroline had an opening that afternoon. The universe had apparently decided it was my turn. Caroline looked exactly like someone you'd never want to face in court. Pin-straight posture, hair in a low chignon, glasses that made her look like she could see straight through bone. "Julia," she said as I walked into her office, "I'm familiar with your company. Your installations in Back Bay are impressive. Compliment noted, trust earned." I sat, and then I told her everything. Not dramatically, not tearfully, just factually, like reporting a glitch in one of my own systems. I told her about the overheard conversation, the count, the ledger of betrayals disguised as rebalancing. I told her about the anniversary, the Vermont cabin, the 7 women. Caroline didn't gasp, she didn't scribble frantically. She simply tilted her head and said, "This is not the strangest justification for infidelity I've heard, but it is one of the more organized." She asked questions, dates, income details, the prenup Ethan had signed, the joint account. Her tone never shifted, never judged. She operated like a surgeon preparing for an operation. "Massachusetts allows no-fault divorce," she explained. "But fault can influence negotiations around asset division. We won't file using adultery as grounds. It limits our flexibility. Instead, we collect evidence quietly, document patterns, and build pressure." She slid a notepad toward me. "First directive, don't leave the house." I blinked. "What? Why?" "If you move out," she said, "you weaken your claim to the marital residence. You also give him room to say you abandoned the relationship. Stay put. Sleep separately. Be polite. Document everything." I swallowed. The idea of sharing space with him again made my skin crawl. "And secondly," she continued, tapping the financial section of my intake form, "you are allowed to use joint funds for legitimate legal representation. As long as you don't drain the account and you document it, the court will consider it fair." I stared at her. "You're saying I can use the joint savings?" She nodded. "Yes, just leave a proportional amount for him." I thought of Ethan's face when he'd asked, "What are you going to do about it?" I thought of the 7 women. I thought of the invisible scar each one had left on me, while he smugly believed he'd balanced the scales. And I realized something. This wasn't revenge. This was survival. $35,000. Seeing the number on the screen should have made me flinch. It didn't. I transferred the money from our joint savings account into Caroline's trust account. I documented the withdrawal. I saved the receipt. I left more than half the account untouched. And as my finger lifted from the trackpad, I felt a small, fierce pang of satisfaction. Disappointment number 8, I thought. The first one he didn't see coming. When I came home, Ethan was on the couch, laptop open, drafting emails. He looked up. "You were gone all day." "I had things to take care of," I said. He nodded, clearly irritated that I wasn't volunteering details. "We should talk about last night." "We will," I said. "Eventually." His eyebrows knit. "Julia, don't be childish. One argument doesn't—" "One argument?" I cut in. "This wasn't an argument. This was you admitting you've been cheating on me for years." He closed the laptop slowly. "I didn't cheat," he said calmly. "Not in the emotional sense." "You've slept with 7 women." 7 isolated encounters, he said firmly. "Not relationships. There's a difference." "Not to me." Something flickered in his expression, annoyance maybe, or fear he wouldn't admit. That night, I slept in the guest bedroom. Ethan didn't ask why. The next day, he tried a different tactic. Pleasantness. After that, frustration. Then passive-aggressive comments. By day 4, he'd settled into an unnerving normalcy, as if my silence was an inconvenience, not a boundary. It wasn't until day 10 that he broke. We were in the kitchen, me spreading peanut butter on toast, him pouring a glass of wine. Too early in the day for it, but I didn't comment. "So," he said sharply, "are we going to talk about this childish Cold War you're staging?" I didn't look up. "I'm eating breakfast." He slapped the counter. "Julia, stop acting like I murdered someone. You disappointed me. I sought balance. It's a system. It worked." "A system," I repeated, "that you created without my consent." "Consent to what? Me coping with your emotional neglect?" My grip tightened on the knife. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked. For me to apologize for your affairs? For me to thank you? I want us to handle this maturely, he snapped. We don't need lawyers involved. I talked to Andrew. My husband's friend, the corporate attorney, I said. He's not a divorce lawyer. He's handled a few cases. So has Google, I said flatly. But I wouldn't let it represent me either. He frowned. We should settle this privately, Julia. Lawyers complicate things. I finally looked at him. I already hired a lawyer, I said. He blinked. What? 10 days ago. Who? Caroline Rothman. The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. But how could you afford her? I lifted my toast, took a calm bite, and said, I used our joint savings. You what? His voice cracked. Without asking me? You didn't ask before cheating on me, I replied. Consider it disappointment number 8. His mouth fell open. Julia, you had no right. It's a joint account, I said lightly. I didn't even take half, and I documented everything. My attorney has the receipts. You're insane. No, I said, meeting his eyes with a steadiness I didn't recognize in myself. I'm responding. He stood there, chest rising and falling, panic bleeding into anger. You planned this, he hissed. You planned all of this. No, Ethan, I wiped a crumb from my plate. You created this. I simply refused to be the only one paying for it. He grabbed his phone and stormed out of the house. I sat in the quiet kitchen and finished my toast. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt full. Ethan didn't come home that night. I didn't text. I didn't check his location. I didn't pace or cry or rehearse speeches in the mirror. I curled up in the guest bed with a heating pad on my stomach, put on an old documentary I'd seen a dozen times, and let myself drift. Not peacefully, but not panicked either. By morning, his car was in the driveway, but he wasn't in our bedroom. He'd slept on the couch, a quiet, petty battle line. At 9:17 a.m., I got a call from Caroline. Your husband visited 3 major law firms this morning, she said, all asking for preliminary consultations. I blinked. He's trying to block me from hiring someone better than him, isn't he? Exactly, she replied. It's a common tactic. If he meets with them, even for 10 minutes, they're ethically barred from representing you later. But he was too late. How late? You met with me first, Caroline said, which means every firm he's visiting is already on my conflict list. He can't use any of them. I closed my eyes, absorbing that. Ethan had never been shy about thinking 2 steps ahead. Now he was learning what it felt like when someone else did. That evening, he burst through the door, tossing his keys onto the counter with a sharp clatter. So that's how you want to play this, he snapped. Using our money to hire the most expensive attorney in the city? It's legal, I said, without looking up from the email I was typing, and documented. You left me with nothing. There's $40,000 left, I said. More than enough for a retainer with Andrew. He scoffed. Andrew charges $15 to $20 just to get started, and then more every week. Do you have any idea what these things cost? Yes, I said calmly. Do you? That landed like a punch. Because Ethan, who spent like future wealth was guaranteed, had never once paused to consider whether future wealth had enough present funding to sustain a divorce. His checking account had maybe $4,000 on a good day. His credit cards lived at the limit thanks to designer suits, curated dinners, and business trips that were really cover for his infidelity. I watched realization wash over him. Slow, painful, inevitable. You planned this, he said again, but this time it was less accusation and more fear. No, I replied, my voice quiet but sharp. I planned to stay married. You planned 7 excuses to undo that. He swallowed hard, jaw ticking. Discovery sounds clinical. A neutral, sterile word. In reality, it's a slow peeling of skin, layer by layer, exposing every tenderness underneath. Caroline's team went to work gathering evidence. Phone records, GPS logs, credit card statements. Every hotel charge Ethan made under the guise of client dinners suddenly had names attached, women attached, dates attached, times attached. A forensic accountant reviewed my business records. She pushed her glasses up her nose and pointed at a timeline she'd constructed. You invested personal funds into the business multiple times, she said. You worked 80-hour weeks for years without taking distributions. Most of your growth is attributable to your efforts, not marital contributions. But Ethan built connections that helped me, I said. Yes, she replied, but that does not equate to ownership, especially since those same events were used for personal extracurricular activities. The implication was clear. Ethan didn't just mix business and personal. He weaponized one to enable the other. And judges hate that. That was the last conversation we had for 3 days. On the 4th day, he cornered me in the hallway. We need to talk, he said. His voice was calm, too calm, the calm of someone rehearsing. I crossed my arms. I'm listening. He took a deep breath. My attorney wants me to ask, do you really want this to get messy? Your attorney? I asked. So Andrew officially took your case? His jaw twitched. He advised me, informally. So you don't have representation, I clarified. His silence said everything. I raised an eyebrow. Then why is your attorney giving advice? He flushed. Julia, I'm serious. We can handle this ourselves. We can sit down, like adults. Like adults, I repeated slowly. Does that include not cheating? Or is that your version of maturity? He dragged a hand through his hair. People make mistakes. 7 times? His voice cracked. I was hurting. So was I snapped. I didn't cheat. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I started walking away. Julia, he called. Wait, please. The word please was new. I stopped. He stared at the floor. Can you just take some responsibility? You worked all the time. You forgot important dates. You dragged me to your parents' cabin where I couldn't even check my phone. What was I supposed to do? Talk to me, I said softly. You could have talked to me. His eyes flicked up. And you would have listened? Yes. He took a shaky breath. Maybe I didn't want to find out you wouldn't. That stunned me. For a moment, he looked almost human. Not the cold stranger from the kitchen, not the entitled man with a scorecard. Just someone who felt small and didn't know how to say it. But then the moment passed. Because fear doesn't excuse betrayal, and cowardice doesn't justify cheating. I'm sorry you felt unseen, I said. But you didn't fix that by hurting me. You multiplied it. He exhaled shakily. Julia, I don't want to lose everything. I looked at him and realized he wasn't talking about losing me. He was talking about losing money, status, reputation. The things that had mattered most to him long before he ever admitted it. That's between you and the court now, I said, and I walked away. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Smaller, too, almost intimate. Ethan sat across the aisle from me, in a suit that didn't fit him right. Either he had lost weight or the dry cleaner had shrunk it. His hair was too gelled, his tie slightly crooked, and for once he didn't look polished. He looked scared. Andrew sat next to him, flipping through papers with an expression that said, I'm only doing this as a favor and regret it deeply. Caroline leaned toward me. He may try to argue duress regarding the prenup. Brace yourself. So I did. But when Andrew stood, clear his throat, and began, it was almost laughable. Your Honor, Ethan was pressured into signing the prenuptial agreement without fully understanding. Caroline stood before he finished. Your Honor, she said smoothly, Ethan has a law degree. Andrew froze. The judge looked up over his glasses. Is this true, Mr. Miller? Ethan squirmed. Yes, but I didn't practice. And did you have independent counsel review the prenup? Caroline asked. Ethan swallowed. Yes. The judge turned back to Andrew. Counselor? Andrew closed the file. Nothing further on that point, Your Honor. Caroline didn't smile, but I felt her satisfaction radiate like heat. Caroline introduced the pattern of marital misconduct. Andrew objected. The judge allowed it. Relevant to asset distribution considerations, he said. Hotel receipts, credit card charges, phone logs, 7 names, 7 timestamps, 7 justifications labeled major disappointment in Ethan's own messages to his friend. Ethan stared at the table like he wished it would swallow him whole. When Caroline displayed a receipt for the Haven Boutique Hotel, dated the same night Ethan told me he had a client dinner, Andrew rubbed his forehead like he had a migraine. When she displayed 2 statements showing he had paid for hotel rooms using our joint credit card, the judge's eyebrows raised. When she revealed that one of his compensation incidents had occurred on the same night I was secretly meeting with his boss to plan a surprise promotion celebration for him, Ethan's face cracked. Completely. For the first time since this began, I felt something real from him. Regret. Not enough to undo anything, but enough to show the truth. He hadn't expected the consequences to arrive so damn quickly. At the end of the hearing, the judge leaned back, steepled his fingers, and said, I strongly advise both parties to negotiate reasonably. Given the evidence, the court views the prenuptial agreement as valid and the petitioner's contributions as substantial. Translation. Julia's business stays Julia's. Ethan's leverage is gone. The scorecard just became a liability. Ethan didn't look at me as we left the room. He didn't have to. I could feel the collapse happening inside him. The man who once believed infidelity was a system was realizing he had underestimated the woman he betrayed. And that realization? The day the divorce was finalized, Boston was unseasonably warm. One of those strange early spring afternoons where the sun feels like it's trying too hard and everything smells faintly like thawing pavement. I stood on the courthouse steps, holding a stack of finalized documents that felt both too light and too heavy when the doors opened behind me. Ethan stepped out. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He wasn't wearing the tailored suits he used to favor. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly overgrown, dark circles smudged deeply beneath his eyes. He looked smaller somehow, like the world had shrunk around him and he hadn't kept up. He finally said, "Congratulations." I let out a slow breath. For what? "You're free," he muttered. "Free to live your perfect life. Free from me. Free from all of it." "You're free too," I said. "You can keep your scorecard going without marriage getting in the way." He winced. For the first time in months, he looked like he actually felt something. "Are you happy now, Julia?" he asked quietly, almost pleading. "Did you win?" I stared at him. "I'm not happy," I said truthfully, "but I'm done keeping score in a game I never agreed to play." That shut him up. After a moment, he shook his head. "You know, you could have tried to understand. You could have asked why I felt so disappointed, so disconnected." "I did ask," I said softly, "for years. You just weren't listening. You were keeping count." He looked away, jaw tight, throat working. "For what it's worth," he said finally, voice low, "I did love you." I nodded. "Love isn't a punch card, Ethan." He closed his eyes. I stepped back from him, feeling something, not triumph, not grief, just release. "Goodbye, Ethan." I didn't wait for him to answer. I walked away, down the courthouse steps and into the sunlight, without once looking back. That was disappointment number 9. It's been 6 months. 6 months since the judge signed the final decree. 6 months since Ethan and I stood on those courthouse steps. 6 months since I walked into a future that felt like a stripped-down, half-finished room waiting for renovation. I sold the house, our house, the one with the creaky stairs and the backyard where I'd installed the first outdoor speaker system I was actually proud of. Selling it required Ethan's signature on the listing agreement. Caroline negotiated a slightly uneven split of the proceeds so I could manage the sale alone. He got a little more cash. I got control. Worth it. The Boston market was on fire. The house sold in 3 days. I used my share to buy something small but beautiful, a loft downtown, above the sleek new showroom I'd leased 3 months before the divorce was finalized. A place full of light and clean lines and peace. A place that was mine. Here's the part I didn't expect. My business exploded. Clients who used to work through Ethan's real estate firm started calling me directly. Some of them admitted, awkwardly, quietly, that they'd been uncomfortable working with him after hearing whispers that he'd used their charity events and networking nights as meetups for his extracurriculars. Old money Boston does not tolerate embarrassment. And Ethan's scorecard wasn't just personal. It was public enough to ripple. I started getting repeat business, brownstones being renovated, luxury condos changing hands, summer homes on the Cape needing full home audio overhauls. I moved into the loft above my showroom and installed a custom sound demo space, so immersive that even I couldn't resist stepping inside at night, just to hear the difference between silence and perfectly balanced music. My therapist says my work has become my grounding. I say it's become my sanctuary. Maybe we're both right. Mutual acquaintances occasionally mention Ethan. Nothing dramatic, no scandals, no public downfall, just a steady, quiet erosion. Calls return slower, clients requesting other agents. A polite distancing that only Boston's old money social circles can achieve with such surgical precision. He isn't ostracized, he's just excluded. And that might be worse. His friends? Most split neatly down predictable lines. The women who believe he was emotionally neglected still defend him. The couples we used to host for dinner? Half stepped away gracefully, unsure what to say. A few of his colleagues privately told me they were relieved the truth came out. They'd noticed the pattern of client events, followed by hotel charges months before I ever did. But the real shift, the one that stung him most, came from his own workplace. Beacon Hill didn't fire him, but his client roster changed. Quietly, subtly, strategically. He went from handling luxury listings to mid-range properties, from director in every press photo to team member in the fine print. Actions have consequences, and Boston's elite doesn't forget. I used to think closure would feel like victory. It doesn't. It feels like breathing without realizing I'd been holding my breath for years. I'm not dating, not avoiding it, just not rushing. For once, my life belongs only to me. My time is mine, my bed is mine, my mistakes and my triumphs are mine too. And in a quiet, strange way, that is enough. Last month, one of my closest friends came by the showroom with a gift, a walnut plaque, polished and glossy, with engraved lettering that made me burst into laughter for the first time in weeks. Disappointment number 8. Realizing actions have consequences. It sits on my office shelf now, not as a trophy, not as bitterness, as a reminder. A reminder that love isn't measured in tallies, that forgiveness isn't a currency to be exchanged, that loyalty isn't something you get compensation for breaking. A reminder that the moment someone starts keeping score, the game is already over. And a reminder, most of all, that the only promises I will ever keep count of again are the ones I make to myself.